Hello everybody, welcome, Birdword 16, the second ever Birdwords in this cool new video format. First one with my face in it, so hello, in case you didn't know how I looked somehow. And the first one to have a special guest, Billy Marshall of Cat Scratch Reader, is going to be joining me at the end of the show. He's going to be talking to me about the Christian McCaffery mega deal that the running back signed last week, what it means for the Panthers, whether or not he's a fan of the deal, how he feels the Panthers' outlook looks for 2020, and what he thinks the team will do in the draft as we steamroll towards the draft. Only 3 days left until the 2020 NFL draft out of Roger Goodell's basement. But yeah, before Billy joins us, let's get into some of this week's news. One of the biggest stories this week was Jay Glazer and his very weird decision to kind of hold off on announcing that Brian Allen was the first player to get COVID-19. Brian Allen, the Los Angeles Rams center, tested positive for COVID-19, the first player in the NFL to do so. And Jay Glazer on Tuesday night on Fox Sports Radio said that he had big news he was holding for his personal show on Wednesday night, and everyone was all I mean, you know how Twitter is. The rumor mill started. Everyone was speculating literally everything possible. He at one point did say it wasn't transactional, but still many thought it might have something to do with the NFL announcing some sort of like hybrid or some sort of affected schedule in the wake of coronavirus, or maybe like a team moving or a partnership with his show, like something promotional like that. But it turned out to be Brian Allen testing positive for COVID-19. This move feels, this choice feels disgusting. And as you see in this article here, unnecessary. Yeah. There really was no reason to do this. Brian Allen apparently didn't want to make this a thing, didn't want this to be announced in just a tweet and nothing else. He wanted Jay Glazer to do more with it, but if Jay Glazer wanted to announce it in a way that wasn't just a tweet, like majority of NFL news is announced, he could have just said on the radio, right? Like, he was on the radio. So he could have said it there and then tweeted immediately after, or he could have said it there and then gotten Fox Sports Radio some attention, but instead he chose to do it in like the weirdest, scummiest way possible. He says that Allen asked him to do it not on the radio, and then also on his show Wednesday night, he already had Rams coach Sean McVay scheduled. So I guess in his mind it was like, all right, I have the Rams on here anyways, or I have some Rams stuff going on here anyways, so I might as well do it together. But still, it just feels really shitty. I tweeted right after that it is shitty, because it was. Brian Allen, prayers for him, but he has a very like dangerous, potentially deadly disease. I hope he'll be okay. He's a man who's obviously in great health. He has access to some of the best doctors in the world as an NFL player. So I truly do hope that he's okay, and he probably will be okay. I know the NBA, Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, they both turned out okay after being the first two players test positive for coronavirus there. But it just feels cheap, like you're using a deadly pandemic to boost up your show. I didn't even know Jay Glazer had his own show. I thought he was like this fantasy guy that just sometimes had reports on injuries and would give advice on the Fox like pregame NFL show. And I assumed he would appear on some other Fox Sports products. I didn't even know he had his own show, but now I do. So I guess he got the job done. A lot of people tuned in that night. I know he has a show. I imagine a lot of other people know that he has a show. I imagine there are a lot of people who maybe hadn't heard of Jay Glazer and now know who Jay Glazer is. So he got the job done, but it just doesn't sit right with me. It feels bad. It feels dumb. It feels disgusting. I think there was another Fox guy that tweeted like, it's not transactional, but it is very good news. And like, he obviously didn't know what it was. He was going for attention, because there's no way he knew it was this. Like, it was Brian Allen, having COVID-19, and then decided that he was going to say it's good news. So it's just a cheap ratings bump for Fox Sports and Jay Glazer, and for that other guy just trying to get some attention on Twitter, just cheapening a very serious thing. And in other news, very quickly after we found out about Brian Allen. Denver Broncos star pass rusher Von Miller, obviously the future Hall of Famer, 2016 Super Bowl MVP, and longtime just beast on the edge of the Broncos defensive line, also tested positive for COVID-19. Similar to Allen, hopefully he's going to be okay. Obviously has access to great doctors, and he's a very healthy man, so hopefully he also recovers, and he will recover. Yeah, he'll be fine. But his story's a little crazy. So according to Miller, he only left his house 4 times in the past month or so, and every single time he did not leave his car. So I think he went through a drive-through, or he had someone deliver like something to his car, things like that, and he still managed to get it. So that means that he either got it from someone he lives with who gave it to him, but more likely is in those like small drive-through interactions, he somehow contracted it. And when those like very small, very insignificant, like you're reaching out at McDonald's to grab he's not going to McDonald's. He's reaching out to where do NFL players eat? That's a drive-through. Does Sweet Green have a drive-through? He's going to like Sweet Green or something, and he grabs his food out of the drive-through, and in that moment right there, he gets COVID-19. Very scary. Also prayers for Vaughn. Hopefully he's okay. He says that he has asthma, which does make him a little bit more vulnerable. But again, healthy man, access to great doctors. Hopefully he's okay. And if we saw with the NBA, as we saw in the NBA, like athletes generally are fine. So yeah, and then a story that never seems to disappear ever is Odell Beckham Jr. once again apparently asking for a trade, and almost happened this week. So yeah, back from the start. At the end of the season, there were rumors that Odell Beckham Jr. was trying to force his way out of Cleveland after a very disappointing 2019 season for the Browns. Obviously, remember, they were one of the most hyped teams in the NFL entering 2019. They added Odell. Baker Mayfield's coming off an incredible rookie season. The offensive line was better. Their defense was getting a year older. A lot of young players back there. They added Greedy Williams, and everything kind of fell apart. Greedy Williams wasn't really who he thought he was going to be. I mean, he should get better. I love Greedy Williams, and he should get better, but he wasn't really very good in year one. Baker Mayfield took a huge step back after an incredible rookie year, and the team just kind of looked lost. And Odell Beckham, if you remember, arrived last year in that trade from New York, forced his way out of New York, and it looks like now he is apparently trying to force his way out of Cleveland. And there was a report that the Minnesota Vikings, who, if you recall, let Stephon Diggs force his way out, as he's now with the Buffalo Bills after they traded him for a treasure trove of picks over to Buffalo. And Odell, it looked like they were looking at Odell to be the replacement for Diggs. That rumor turned out to be false. Both Colin Cowherd and Ian Rappaport reported that their sources were telling him there was actually no push from the Vikings for Odell Beckham Jr. There were also reports that the New England Patriots were interested in Odell Beckham Jr., but nothing seemed to materialize from those. It seems like Odell is not on the move. I think one of the Browns executives even came out and said that Odell isn't on the move and that those rumors are false and that he's a key part of the team, which makes sense. But yeah, I love Odell, but it seems like he just can't escape stuff like this. The drama is always churning for him. I'm not sure why he would want to leave Cleveland even. He's a wide receiver one. I'm not sure what's happening behind the scenes. I'm not sure if he likes the city, but it's still a team that's on the up. It's hard for a team like Cleveland, who didn't really have a winning culture at all. Just losing culture for 10 years consistently, worse than the AFC North, one of the worst teams of the NFL. Won one game in 2 years. They had the number one pick in back-to-back years. It's hard for that team to suddenly turn around and compete in the AFC or even make the playoffs. And they obviously kind of got unlucky because the Baltimore Ravens were the surprise team of the league, number one overall seed in the AFC playoffs, one of the best teams in the league. Probably should have won the Super Bowl if Lamar Jackson hadn't choked in that game against the Titans. Also, the Pittsburgh Steelers, despite losing Ben Roethlisberger, were actually fine. Their defense finally got its shit together after some years of being terrible. Looks like they're getting back to the days of old where the Steelers are going to have this just smash mouth, we're going to beat you up defense, and maybe not the offense, because Ben Roethlisberger has fallen off, and it doesn't look like any of their younger quarterbacks can really get the job done either. But yeah, I still think the Browns should enter next year, looking forward to the playoffs, especially, I mean, if we get a 2020 season. if if we get a 2020 season, the Browns should expect to be in the playoffs, especially now that we've added this like 7th playoff seed. Their chances to do it have gone up. Baker Mayfield, I think last year was just, I don't know, just a down year. He's shown that he can play very well in the NFL, and there's no reason to believe that he can't get back to that level. Odell had a down year, but a lot of that probably goes to Baker, and players like Greedy should improve as they develop more in the NFL. So I like that Odell's staying with the Browns. I like what the Browns are building. As a Lions fan personally, you probably see a Lions flag back there. It's nice to see teams like the Browns kind of get on the up, because it means that the Lions could potentially do the same. Another player that's trade rumors circulating about that might actually get traded is O.J. Howard. O.J. Howard, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers tight end, former Alabama Crimson Tide tight end. He was a subject of trade rumors last year at the deadline, and this week, once again, his name is swirling around. Apparently, he might be a player on the move this week as we head into the NFL draft. He might be a player who gets traded on draft day itself, depending on how the chips fall and if anyone, or if the Bucs want to move up and to make a selection earlier than their assigned pick. This is interesting. This is a interesting scenario because this one might actually happen. So he's a great player. He's very athletic. He's very athletic. He's not the best blocker, but he's like a really good he's a really good move tight end. Like he can line up as wide receiver, line up as slot receiver, line up as a tight end, and just catch a lot of passes. And I feel like he worked really well in the Bucs defense with Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. But obviously when you're playing with arguably 2 top 5 receivers next to you, it's hard to really put up the numbers. So his best season was 2018, but in 2019 he finished about 100 yards for his career high, 459 yards, 1 touchdown, 34 receptions, which matches his career high, 53 targets. Those numbers aren't they're not bad numbers for a tight end, but they're not particularly good. They don't match up to his skill level. They don't match up to what many were hoping that O.J. Howard would be when he was entering the NFL a few years ago. So I see why he would want out. I see why the Bucs would want to get rid of him. You have 2 top 5 receivers. You probably don't need a top level tight end. You can sell off O.J. Howard while his value is still high and maybe get some draft capital. If they want to move up in the draft this year, they might not even have to give up their first round pick if they can trade O.J. Howard for like a top 10 pick or something, or maybe not top 10 pick, but like O.J. Howard plus like some late round picks for like a top 15, top 20 pick. That's a deal that I could see happening. Like he's still very young. He's only 25. He still has 2 more years, I believe, on his rookie contract. Yeah, drafted in 2017, so he should have 2 more. Yep. Yeah, he should have 2 more years on his rookie contract. His 5th-year option is going to come up next year, so he's technically entering contract year this year. So yeah, I see why a team would want to trade for O.J. Howard, and I also see why the Bucs would want to trade away O.J. Howard. Bucs, they're a team on the up though, and I would love to see what Tom Brady could do with O.J. Howard. Obviously, Tom Brady has worked well with tight ends in the past, Aaron Hernandez, Rob Gronkowski, and I think Howard could really thrive with a player like Brady in town. But we'll see how it works out for him, because I think the Bucs are a team who probably will win the NFC South this year and potentially compete for a Super Bowl. Like they are, obviously the Brady move is the one that got all the attention, but I think they're a team who's very good. Their offense is very good now that they have a stable quarterback, someone who isn't volatile like Winston and throwing 30 interceptions a year. I think they can really maximize the use of Godwin and Evans, and potentially even Howard if he sticks around. Their defense really stepped up after having one of the worst secondaries in the league for a very long time. They had some youngsters like Sean Murphy-Bunting and MJ Stewart really towards the end of the year like step up to the plate and become really good. Their front 7 it's fine. It's not perfect, but it's fine. This is a team who can compete this year, and I think a lot of people are sleeping on them. I think 2 years ago they were the big sleeper team, and they really disappointed, and that soured everyone. And then last year again, I think they maybe overperformed last year but because a lot of people had them in like the top 5 of the NFL, drafting in the top 5 as one of the worst teams in the NFL. They were fine. They weren't good, but they weren't like terrible either. But yeah, I think the Bucs are really, really a team to watch out for this year. And speaking of the NFL draft and trades in particular, the Detroit Lions, my team. So yeah, we have the 3rd overall pick in the draft this year. Obviously, 2019 was an absolute disaster. Matthew Stafford got injured midway through the year after that game against the Raiders. We lost the last 9 games of the season. I mean, yeah, finished the year 3-12-1. Not a year to remember. Not a fun time to be a Detroit Lions fan. So we're picking in the top 3. Last year we picked at 8, and I was like, well, damn, 8th overall pick. This is the highest we're going to be picking in a very long time. Like this is our chance to really get a star. And then only a year later we're picking number 3. But I don't think we're as bad as like the third worst team in the NFL. I think it's, you lose your quarterback, especially a quarterback like Stafford. What are you going to do? Jeff Driscoll and David Blow, not good players. So. But it is what it is. But obviously pick 3 is a premium pick. A lot of teams want it, especially in a draft where a lot of teams are looking for a quarterback. Joe Burrow of LSU seems pretty locked into that number 1 spot in Cincinnati. But after that, things get kind of murky. You assume Washington will take Chase Young of Ohio State. You assume that's the big selection for them there. Obviously, Chase Young, regarded by many to be one of the best prospects ever, best player in college football last year, absolute stud, just dominated every single Ohio State game. And Ohio State had some great players all around the field, but he somehow every game became about Chase Young, which is incredible. So those two probably locked in the 1 and 2 spots, although I hope Washington does trade out of the 2 spot to a team that needs a quarterback and lets Chase Young fall to us. That's probably not happening though. So that leaves us in a weird spot because we can snag someone like Jeffrey Okudah, also of Ohio State, fix our need at cornerback. Obviously, Darius Slay went to the Philadelphia Eagles this offseason, and while Desmond Trufant he's a fine replacement, Okudah would give us a solid cornerback number 1, hopefully, for the future. And also, we still need a cornerback too, so moving Trufant to corner 2 would be a great move for the team. But on a conference call on Friday, our general manager Bob Quinn said that he's had a few conversations with other teams over the past few weeks about potentially trading the pick. Obviously, there is a lot of interest in Tua Tagovailoa out of Alabama and Justin Herbert out of Oregon. Some teams would be willing to trade up to them. They're really the only 2 other quarterback prospects that are seen as top prospects in this draft, and missing out on one of them means you kind of have to wait for maybe a day 2 or day 3 guy. And do you want a day 2 or day 3 guy to be your franchise quarterback? Do you trust Jalen Hurts or Jordan Love or Jacob Eason? Do you trust them to be the guy for your team going forward? Probably not. So if you miss out on Herbert or Tagovailoa, you might have to wait another year to find your franchise guy, which really, really does suck. So there might be a bidding war for the Lions at pick 3, and it looks like Bob Quinn is well aware of this, so don't be surprised if we have a trade at number 3. And don't be surprised if we have a trade at number 4 as well, because right behind the Lions is New York Giants. Another team already have a quarterback in Daniel Jones, and if a team misses out on trading up with the Lions, and let's say the Dolphins trade up with the Lions and they take Tagovailoa, then that leaves only 1 quarterback left. So expect a team like the Chargers to maybe make a move up to the Giants spot to snag that last guy and just secure him. Make sure no one else can beat you to the punch there. So don't be surprised if there are 2, maybe 3 trades, depending on what Washington does, in the top 5. Very, very interesting shuffling of the chairs at the top of the draft. Obviously, I personally hope that we don't trade. Obviously, I would like the draft capital. I think each draft pick's a lottery ticket, but also I think elite players do more than average players. I mean, that's obvious, but let me explain that. So I'd rather have someone like Jeffrey Okudah, someone who probably will be an elite player. Just take him at 3 and have that elite player. Don't trade back to like 10 or something or 5 and then draft a guy who's more of a risk. I would rather have 1 elite player like Okudah than 2 players, 1 guy who's like above average and 1 guy who kind of sucks. I'd rather just have Okudah. He's the safest pick. Mitigate risk. He's a stud. Just take him. don't. Who cares about other teams? Who cares about draft capital? The extra fourth round pick you're gonna get in the deal, that doesn't matter. The fourth guy you're gonna pick in the fourth round is gonna be useless. We picked Michael Roberts in the fourth round in 2017. That dude didn't do anything. I don't know why. Like, I'd rather have Okuda than trade back and get random late round picks. But also speaking of quarterbacks, Tua Tagovailoa, the Alabama quarterback we mentioned earlier, who I personally think is the second best quarterback in this draft, right behind Joe Burrow. I think he's significantly better than Justin Herbert too. So, I mean, I don't know how teams feel, but I feel that whoever trades up first and gets Tagovailoa instead of Herbert is getting a huge win for them if they get Tagovailoa over Herbert. But he apparently failed at least one physical. Obviously, he's a player who struggled with injuries throughout his career. He had a knee injury he was struggling with for a bit, and then he suffered a hip injury against Mississippi State last season, which cut his college career short. He didn't play the second half of the 2020 season as Alabama missed the college football playoff for literally the first time ever, and apparently failed at least one physical. I think teams shouldn't overreact if there isn't any sort of like long-term or like lifetime damage to Tagovailoa's hip, and once he does fully recover from this injury, he is recovered. There's no like high re-injury risk or anything like that. So I think teams might overreact. Sometimes they do. We saw it with Harold Landry in 2017, in 2018, Harold Landry, the Boston College defensive end, great player, absolute stud, had an ankle injury, something very small. Teams freaked out about it, let him fall. He fell all the way to second round. The Tennessee Titans scooped him up, and now he's been a very, very good player for them. And yeah, like, I think teams shouldn't let the same thing happen to Tagovailoa. Like, don't get scared of an injury. He will heal from the injury. You're drafting not just for the immediate future. Like, by the time games are even played again, Tagovailoa will be fully healed from that injury. So you don't really have to worry about it. Like, he'll be okay. Don't mess up. Don't hinder your franchise for 10, 15 years and take Justin Herbert over Tua Tagovailoa, because Justin Herbert, quite frankly, he's not very good. He has a big arm. He's very athletic. I think he can be a good quarterback if he gets it all together, fixes mechanics, fixes decision making, and all that. But I think at the moment he's just not good, and there's no guarantee he'll be good. Tua Tagovailoa has all the physical tools. He's a great decision maker. He's a great quarterback. I mean, you can't say healthy. That's a problem, I guess. But I would rather have Tagovailoa than Herbert. I would much rather have Tagovailoa than Herbert. Herbert can barely play. So I think teams shouldn't overreact, and don't make the mistake that teams that happen with Harold Landry. And now over to my chat with Billy Marshall from yesterday. We're going to talk about Christian McCaffery and other stuff. Play it now.
And yeah, here we are with Billy Marshall from Cat Scratch Reader, Carolina Panthers expert and analyst, and also big draft Twitter guy. You should all follow on Twitter. Hey, Billy, how's it going?
Going well. How are you?
Good. So yeah, Christian McCaffery obviously signed that gigantic 4-year, $64 million extension with the Panthers last week. How do you, as a Panthers analyst and a Panthers fan, feel about that deal?
Well, a little mixed. On one hand, you're happy for the player, just because the nature of the running back position that involves a lot of wear and tear, and whenever you're playing a violent sport like professional football, you always enjoy seeing players get paid. So from that perspective, it's very good deal for McCaffrey himself. I think that the money guaranteed in the first 3 years is, pretty in line with what Ezekiel Elliott got. So I don't think he really blew the market out of proportion. But on the other hand, as a Panthers fan, you're wondering why they made this deal at this time, because of the resources that they should be allocating their money towards in the future. In those positions, in my opinion, at least when it comes to the success of a rushing game, is more built on the offensive scheme and the offensive line. And I feel like the Panthers should have prioritized those areas first before they made a commitment to pay McCaffrey. So I felt that it was a little premature. He was still only, just completed 3 years, so he still was under contract next year and the year after with a 5th-year option. So a little indifferent. Like I said, I'm happy for the player, but overall for the team, it's not going to cripple them like it did with Dallas, because Dallas is a more top-heavy team that's ready to compete right now. The same with the Rams when they made the Gurley deal. Panthers are in a different stage of their team development, so I don't think it's going to hamstring them in the future like it did with those two teams. But I do think that they should probably, they should have committed to other positions at premium money before running back.
And so do you think that the Panthers might fare a little better than the Rams did? Obviously, the Rams with Todd Gurley and that mega deal that didn't work out at all. You think the Panthers might fare a little bit better off?
Yeah, so it's tough to really judge like how the deals will do in isolation because I'm not really sure how well the Panthers will do win-loss wise, and just from my own perspective, I don't believe McCaffrey is worth, 2 to 3 extra wins as a player. I just don't think any running backs are, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But I do think he offers, a lot of value in the passing game, even though you probably should, again, be investing in actual wide receivers and tight ends. But still, he is a good route runner. He wasn't really used as much down the field, especially like as a vertical option. So maybe they can utilize him in those areas more than they did in the past. But just speaking like how this will help the team in the future, I don't think it's going to necessarily hurt them financially, but I'm not sure it's going to help them on the field within the next 3 years unless they, really find and develop talent in those other positions I mentioned earlier.
Mhm. And I know you were someone on Twitter at least who really was kind of pushing for a trade. Like you thought the Panthers should sell McCaffrey high. What do you think a potential trade return for McCaffrey would be if they chose that option?
I really don't think it would have been much because you're already seeing a lot of smart teams. You look at the Ravens, you look at the Eagles and the Chiefs, and you see how their investment to the running game is not. They're not really compatible with teams who pay running backs. They're teams who usually find cheap talent on the bottom of the end of the roster. They'd invest in them and no higher than a day 2 pick in the draft, and they're usually not ones to compensate those players either. So in my opinion, I don't really think you would have gotten more than maybe multiple day 2 picks. I don't think you would have gotten like a first rounder. I know there's some desperate teams out there, but I just don't really see that team that exists right now. Maybe, there's always things that can shock me, but I'm just not sure you would have gotten more than multiple day 2 picks, which it could go a long way in helping a team like Carolina rebuild, but still it's really tough to go out there and kind of gauge the market.
And another big trade, another big move the Panthers made this offseason was the 3-year, $63 million deal to Teddy Bridgewater. Were you a fan of that move for him being your quarterback going forward?
So I like Teddy Bridgewater as a player. I always have. I've pretty much like when I first started, joining draft Twitter and watching prospects. It was 2013, and Teddy Bridgewater was like, my QB1 back then. So I've always been a huge fan of him, even when he was with the Vikings, and unfortunately had the setback with the major injury. So I think he's like the epitome of like an average quarterback, which is fine. I mean, you'd rather have a guy like him than a guy like Kyle Allen or um, Mitch Trubisky. So I think he's like competent in some ways. And so I was fine with the deal. It's nothing too crazy. 3 years, 63 million. The first 2 years essentially are guaranteed. So yeah, I don't really see it as a deal that will hamstring them in the future. And I don't think it'll prevent them from drafting quarterback this year or next year. So yeah, I was fine with it. But speaking about the deal, you also have to speak about the decision they made with Cam Newton because those two things
Yeah.
kind of go together.
Or were you a fan of letting Cam Newton walk? Or I guess not
And
letting him walk, releasing him.
yeah, I just feel like the way they managed the entire situation, starting when they first, spoke to him publicly, or I don't know, Cam during the Super Bowl week went around Radio Row saying that he had very encouraging conversations with like the team brass and that he was excited to join the team, blah, blah, blah. And then at the combine, they kind of showed a commitment to him that he wouldn't be traded or all this other stuff. And then, you know, 2 days into free agency, they're essentially saying that he can go look for a trade partner.
Yeah.
So the mixed messaging, I don't think really did much favors to him. I'm not really sure how they, what their plan was, because I think that there are methods to propping up a player's, perceived value that could enable you to potentially get some type of trade compensation for it. I mean, no one here thinks that Nick Foles is like a better option than Cam Newton. And
Yeah.
Foles was having, he had a market where he got a fourth round pick, especially on his contract. And Cam, he only makes like $19 million a year, so it's nothing too crazy. But overall, it depends like what direction they want to go in. The direction that I'm seeing them go in now, it's like they do want to compete. So I don't know why you wouldn't want to bring Cam Newton. Like there's probably no system where Cam Newton isn't an upgrade over Teddy Bridgewater. So I don't really buy the arguments about the system being an issue. And then because, they were signing all these players like Robbie Anderson and John Miller, and God, I'm almost forgetting who they signed, but they went out and signed quite a bit of talent, in this free agency period. I wouldn't necessarily call all of them talented, but they did sign some players who are NFL-worthy players. And so if they were going to go this route with Teddy Bridgewater, or excuse me, if they were going to go this route, I wish they would have had Cam Newton instead of Bridgewater, because then I think you could still compete. But with Bridgewater, I think there's a ceiling, and I'm not sure they're going to reach that. So if they were going to trade Cam, then I would have preferred they take a similar approach to the Dolphins last year, where they can just sell off a lot of assets and really rebuild their team for the future. So that's kind of like where I stand. I know it's a little more complicated than it sounds, but
Yeah. No, it does seem like they're stuck between two minds. Obviously, you give McCaffrey that deal, you sign Robbie Anderson, but on the other hand, you let Newton go, you let Greg Olsen go. I mean, they couldn't control Luke Kuechly, but you also lose Luke Kuechly to retirement, where they've like lost a lot of talent, but then also gained talent. So you don't know, are they trying to compete this year? Are they trying to like build for the future? Weird spot. So you would think the team can compete in 2020 though, if there's a 2020 season.
well, I think the moves that they made signal that they want to compete. How they do, it's up for discussion. I don't really
Yeah.
think they're probably not going to win more than 6 or 7 games, but I don't think unfortunately they're not going to also be bad enough to be picking like in the top 3 or 4 of the draft where they
Yeah.
could potentially get a new QB. So yeah, I'm kind of at the point where these signings and these moves, they kind of rehabilitated the offense. The defense, which was the worst in the league last year, has somehow gotten worse through a lot of the departures, and they haven't really done anything to address it. So I don't know. Like I think the defense will be really bad, but the offense will be better. So it's kind of like a mixture of how do you tug those two
Mhm.
areas. But at the end of the day, that still kind of caps your ceiling at like 5 to 6 wins potentially.
Yeah. So internally, you think their plan is to win this year, though? Like you think at least the management, they're building a team that they believe can win. That's the outward plan, at least.
Yeah, I mean that certainly sounds like that's the plan, because just by who they've signed and what they've been able to do in free agency, I think it gives you a decent indicator of what their thought process is moving forward.
And obviously on Thursday, the NFL draft, you guys have the 7th overall pick. You mentioned a quarterback might be in play at that pick. I guess first, who do you want the Panthers to select, and who do you think they're going to select, if those are
Y-
different players?
Right. So I've been clamoring for Tua since January, since he declared. And again, I'm not a medical professional. I don't really know what his prognosis is and how he's doing medically, but I mean, he looked fairly good to me in that pro day video. And if they do go quarterback, he's probably the only one I would want, because I just don't really see another quarterback. I mean, Joe Burrow is going once, but that's obviously
Yeah.
not going to happen. So Yeah, he would be like the only one. I don't really want a project like Herbert or Love. I think those two guys are not really refined in any way yet. And despite having Teddy Bridgewater on the roster, I'd rather have someone like Tua who might not be there medically, but you can still give him another year to rehab and
Mhm.
then come back in the future and be your potential starting guy. Because I just don't really see Carolina, being bad enough to be selecting in the top 2 next year to potentially get
Yeah.
Fields or Lawrence. So, but yeah, no, Tua is who I want, but I think they're probably gonna go defense, and my other hope is potentially Okuda falls, but again, that seems unlikely. So there's been a lot of rumblings about C.J. Henderson, the cornerback from Florida. A lot of people have kind of misconstrued my analysis on him. I think he's a little overrated, but if he's a second cornerback off the board, that's totally fine. I just take issue with him potentially being the first quarterback off the board, um, because I think Okuda is much more superior to him.
Mhm.
So if they take Henderson, which by all indications that seems to be the hot name, then I mean, fine. That's not a terrible pick, but I'd rather wish they, you know, kind of go be a little bold and take Tua.
Yeah. Would you be fine if they took Isaiah Simmons, the linebacker safety hybrid out of Clemson? He's a popular name in the top 10 for basically every team that needs a defender right now.
Right. Yeah, no, I would be totally fine if they took Simmons as well. Um, I'm not really sure where he goes. His draft stock has been a little unpredictable to project, and a lot of these tweener players, you never really know what type of how the NFL values them. I mean, I think Derwin James was a better prospect, but even he dropped to 17 or 19 or whatever it was.
Mhm.
And I think that maybe the NFL overcorrects this year and takes Simmons earlier than they took Derwin. But yeah, no, I really like Simmons' game. I think he's an athletic freak, just the way he moves and the way he flips his hips and turns into coverage, and he's very controlled and aggressive coming downhill. So you don't really see him missing too many tackles. He tackles with perfect technique. He's, like I said, he's rangy in coverage. I don't really want him as a safety, because I do think that his flaws could potentially be exposed back there. But at the same time, you do have the option of him dropping back to create disguise in your defense. So yeah, I would be really happy with Isaiah Simmons if they went that route.
And about Tua, back to him. Do you think the Panthers, would you like them to trade up for Tua, or would you only want Tua if they kind of stay pat and he falls to them? Because it will be handsome. It will be like a big, handsome sum of picks to get all the way up to 3 or 4 for Tua.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm not really sure what intel is being said about his stock, because I read something this morning from someone at the Miami Herald that said Tua could potentially fall to 18,
Okay.
and I'm hearing other stuff about Miami being in hot pursuit or potentially the Chargers trading up for him. So yeah, I would be fine trading up for Tua, to answer your question. I'm just not really
You're not
sure
sure you would
what to
need
make
to.
of all the intel that's being floated around and what type of discussions teams are having. But yeah, I would totally be fine with him at 3 or 4 if they had to give up a 2021 second or third round pick or whatever it is, and then your second this year or next year. Um, I'd be fine with it.
Mhm. All right. And thank you so much for chatting with me, Billy. You can follow Billy on Twitter at BillyM_91. And you can find his work at Cat Scratch Reader. Thank you so much, Billy.
Yeah, no problem.